Good evening and welcome to the Development Management Committee. I'm Councillor Kieran Bowker, the Chairman of the committee. Before we start the meeting, please be aware of the following. Item 1, 49 Church Road, Thundersley, has been withdrawn by the applicant following the publication of the agenda. Item 3, 179 Kiln Road, Thundersley, has been withdrawn from the meeting so that further information can be obtained from the applicant relating to information submitted after the consultation period and will be considered at a future meeting of the committee. Just some housekeeping. I need to make the public aware of the following. We're not expecting a fire drill tonight, so if the fire alarm goes off, please make your way out of the nearest emergency exit and gather at the front of Runnymede Hall. Meetings of the committee are webcast and broadcast on the internet, so if you're seated in the public gallery, it's possible that your image will become part of the broadcast. Lastly, may I ask all present to switch mobile phones to silent? Thank you. May I ask the Development Management Committee members present who are seated in the chamber in front of me to introduce themselves, stating their name only, starting on my left.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Peter Craig, Vice Chairman of this committee.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Carol Sage.
Good evening, Councillor Alan Acott.
Good evening, Councillor Rob Lillis.
Good evening, Councillor Gareth Howlett.
Good evening, Councillor Hannah Barton-Brown.
Good evening, Councillor Jackie Thornton.
Good evening, Councillor Tom Skip.
May I ask the officers present to introduce themselves, again, starting on my left.
Stephen Garner, the Planning Manager.
Cheryl Salmon and I'm the Committee Officer.
Jason Bishop, Legal Advisor to the committee.
May I ask any other members present to introduce themselves?
Michael Dearson, Councillor.
I see no one from Canvey Island Town Council are here. Okay. I do apologise.
Sorry, Councillor Andrew Thornton.
Apologies, Councillor Thornton. May I ask any other members here? That's that. The first item on the agenda is apologies. Are there any apologies for absence?
Chair, I have apologies from Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Item number 2 is members' interests. Are there any members' interests? Councillor Liz.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to agenda item 5.4, or as amended, I would like to declare that I was a youth team manager and coach of a Benfleet Football Club associated team, but this was over 7 years ago, and I have had no dealings or association with anyone at the club since that time. I do not therefore believe that this previous association is such as to affect my judgment of this matter, and I will be making my decision based upon the content of the Planning Officer's report and after considering and listening to all the views as expressed during the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lillis. Are the minutes for the Development Management Committee held on the 4th of July 2023 agreed?
Agreed.
Item 4, public speakers. Regarding item 2, Mr Silk will speak in objection. The applicant is unable to attend, but has requested that a statement be read out on his behalf. Item 5, deposited plans. Item 2 is 49 Kiln Road, Thundersley in Cedar Ward. I'll now hand over to the Planning Officer to present this item.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is at 49 Kiln Road and is proposed to change an existing residential dwelling to what is known as a Class C2 residential institution for the care of children. Just a bit of context for the site. The site is located on the corner of Connybrook, a little bit up the road from the council office, further down the road from the council offices. You've got a, if I move on, you've got a small sort of parade of, there's sort of a little cafe here. There's a few more shops further up the road here, and just out of shot down here you've got the college next door and the council offices. The proposal is solely for the change of use of the building. There are no proposed changes to the external appearance of the building. And so what falls to be considered this evening for members is purely the use of the building, which is proposed to change. As I said, it's proposed to be changed to a house to house up to 4 13 to 18-year-olds that are under the care of the local authority. There is a duty of care of local authorities such as Essex County Council to place children in care within 20 miles of their home, and this is to sort of help facilitate that. So, as well as the maximum of 4 children that would be sited at the property, there are proposed to always be 2 members of staff at the property, 2 during the day and 2 at night, with a short overlap in between. And that is to facilitate sort of a staff handover period. And just to give a bit of context around sort of the need for children's care, in August 2022, across Essex, there were 1,140 children in care that required housing, and it's estimated that by 2024 this could rise to 1,250 children. It's also, during the process, have been asked by members if there are any other sort of facilities similar to this in the borough that we can draw comparisons with. Whilst each planning application should be assessed on its own merits, we are aware as a planning department of 4 similar residential institutions in the borough, and after checking with other council departments, they have not received any complaints about how those have operated. Also, as set out in the report, a recent ministerial statement has set out how planning should not be seen as a barrier to creating these types of homes in order to address a nationwide issue that's becoming apparent for the care of children. I should just mention briefly that some of the comments on this application received by members of the public admitted in the comments themselves that they were based off of speculation and assumptions and stereotypes. Whilst we need to decide, the application needs to be decided tonight on the basis of fact. We can't assume anything or rely on stereotypes. We have to rely on material planning considerations. Overall, it's considered that given this is an existing residential area, the proposed use as a residential care home for children is suitable. It's close by to nearby facilities. There is a bus stop, not quite outside, but just down the road, providing adequate transport links. There's the nearby college, local schools, shops, nearby public open spaces, which are considered to sort of be a benefit to any future occupants of the premises. And that overall it's considered that the property should be approved by officers. Oh, that's the recommendation put forward this evening, and I'll hand back to the chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Silk, would you like to make your statement, please, if you would step over to the lectern? Thank you. Just to remind you, I'm sure you're aware you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to address the committee this evening. Our main objections are: Essex parking standards require 6 parking spaces on the site. The officer's report says 3 spaces are adequate, and the site can accommodate 3 spaces to the preferred bay sizes. However, no parking layout plan has been submitted to show how these 3 spaces can be laid out within the site, and no vehicle swept analysis to show how the spaces can be used. There is insufficient space within the site to manoeuvre a vehicle to make all 3 spaces usable and not to need to reverse out into the busy A13. With such a plan, I do not see how the committee can be expected to make a decision. Essex Highways raised no concern as reported by the officer. However, Essex Highways rarely get involved in the usability of parking spaces off the highway in developments of this nature. This matter is for the local planning authority to come to a view on. The local plan states that, amongst other things, new development should minimise or mitigate environmental impacts for the benefit of the existing and prospective occupants of neighbouring land. Such impacts may include unacceptable noise and disturbance. The officer's report refers to a residential area being most suitable for a children's home. I suggest such a proposed use would better suit a detached property occupying a generous plot, not at a premises that is attached to a neighbouring residential property. The report says that the ground floor bedroom is to be used as an office and the bedroom for staff. This room is directly attached to number 51 Kiln Road and will be in use as an office 24 hours of the day. This is attached to our property. Planning permission should not be granted for use that will negatively affect the enjoyment of an existing residential property. The officer's report refers to the applicant's statement. It was speculated that the home will be used for those awaiting to be charged with a criminal sentence. There is no speculation. The applicant's letter refers to the following statement. Section 21 requires a local authority to accommodate certain children who are either removed or kept away from home under Part 5 of the 1989 Children's Act, or who are subject to a criminal court order. Essex Police were unable to comment fully due to the lack of information on the application. We have been members of the local community for 30 years. We understand with development there is change, but the planning system is also there to protect and enhance the area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silk.
Thank you.
Ms Salmon, would you like to read the statement on behalf of the applicant, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is from Mr. Zola, the applicant. Just let me start. I'm writing this letter in support of my application to change the use of the property into a children's residential home. The home will cater for 4 children and employ staff who will provide care on a permanent basis. This means the service will meet the needs of the community by supporting some of the most vulnerable children in our society, in addition to providing employment opportunities to the local community. The location of the property is ideal as it is close to all local amenities which will be accessible to those children in need. Regarding the impact on neighbours, my family currently resides on the property and we have 3 children of our own. In addition, my 3 children from a previous relationship occasionally stay with us, bringing the total number of residents to between 5 and 8. Should your committee grant us permission to change the house's use, 2 staff members caring for 4 children would bring the number of persons staying in the house at any given time to 6, which is less than the current maximum occupancy. The children's home we intend to establish would support vulnerable children in the local community and undoubtedly assist Essex County Council in fulfilling its legal obligation to care for children in need. The accommodation will offer placements to children under the care Essex County Council Local Authority and neighbouring local authorities. The Children Act 1989 requires local authorities to secure accommodation for children in their care within 20 miles of home and within local authority boundaries wherever possible and appropriate. Local authorities have several duties towards children within their area which are related to the sufficiency duty. In particular, Section 17(1) of the 1989 Act provides that it is the general duty of a local authority to provide a range and level of services to children in need as defined in Section 17(10) of the 1989 Act and their families in the local area which are appropriate to their needs. Section 20 of that Act requires local authorities to provide accommodation for children in need within their area who appear to them to require accommodation in accordance with the provisions of that section. Section 21 requires a local authority to accommodate certain children who are either removed or kept away from home under Part 5 of the 1989 Act or who are subject to a criminal court order. The ECC's sufficiency strategy for the period between 2023 and 2026 states as of August 2022, there were 1,140 children in care in Essex. Forecasts show numbers may rise to 1,250 within the next 2 years, considering pressures from increased separated migrant children, court delays and increased referrals into the system. The same document highlights the fact ECC currently has difficulties to meet demand for solo/dual residential and specialist residential. In addition, a recent article in The Guardian highlighted the difficulties faced by local authorities in placing children in their areas. Therefore, the children residential home we intend to open can assist local authorities in the Essex area and its vicinity in addressing the acute shortage of available placements. The home will be regulated by Ofsted and comply with all statutory requirements. Each child will be placed by social services which will maintain their statutory responsibilities. Our organisation will collaborate with social services in order to meet the needs of these children. We are confident that we will provide a service that adheres to high standards of care while minimising disturbances to the surrounding community. We're looking forward to our application for change of use successfully assessed by your committee, being successfully assessed by your committee.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Before I move the recommendation, do members have any questions for the planning officer about this planning application? Please note this is the members' opportunity to seek clarification from the planning officer on any matters they are unclear of regarding the application. Members should refrain from making statements about their views on the proposal. These should be expressed in the debate section of the meeting. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, the report states that environmental health and the police were consulted, so why not Essex County Council? Surely Children's Services or similar should have been consulted regarding the suitability of the site, suitability of the applicant, and for their endorsement of the operating management plan, which I was unable to view online last night, so if it's all in there, I do apologise, but if you could answer that, I'd appreciate it, Steve.
So whilst Essex County Council have a duty to provide these care facilities, it's not part of the planning process. It's down to the local planning authority to consider whether a property is acceptable or not. Whilst there's an identified need, it's not necessarily up to County Council to comment on whether that need needs to be met here or not. So basically, when it comes down to it, the applicant wouldn't be changing this property into a care home if it wasn't required. The requirements that Essex County Council would need to be met are for it to be Ofsted regulated, which they've said would be done. However, that's not part of the planning process. For it to be Ofsted regulated, or any of the many of the other requirements that Essex County Council require, is not a requirement of the planning permission process. It's sort of a separate aspect of it. We have spoken to Essex County Council about this, informally, mainly because we were asking them about any other facilities that were operating in the borough. Informally, they'd not raised any sort of concerns to it, and it wasn't considered necessary to consult them formally on the matter, because they wouldn't have anything further to add to the planning process. And then I feel like I've probably missed one of your questions in there. Sorry.
No, I can read it back. It said, surely Essex County Council should have been consulted regarding suitability of the site, suitability of the applicant, and for their endorsement of the operating management plan. They were the three thrusts, if you like.
So just to expand on the operating management plan, whilst the operating management plan that's been submitted is to address some of the concerns that officers had with its operating, there will be, for Essex County Council and Ofsted, there will be much more detailed plans about potentially going down into individual care for each child, but that's not part of the planning process. That stays with Ofsted, Essex County Council, and the needs of individuals that are placed there. So the operating management plan that's been submitted is just to consider what we considered were the planning issues that we saw with the proposal, not so much the actual day-to-day running and how it was practically going to function on a day-to-day basis, because that would be something to do with between Ofsted and Essex County Council, which is separate from the planning process.
Councillor Thornton. Councillor Skip.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have one question, which is probably not directly a planning matter, but as it's referred to in the report, I will ask the question anyway. You mentioned there'll be 2 staff on at night. Will they both be awake shifts or sleeping shifts? No.
We don't. I'm not aware that it's been said anywhere in the paperwork, and we're not sure. I'm not sure of that. It would be. It's something that's probably not part of the planning process. It's not a material consideration, but that would be down to Ofsted requirements as to whether they need to be awake on shift or whether they are allowed to or alternate between sleeping. I don't know.
Councillor Thornton.
Thank you. Yes. If we grant the change of use for this, we have very little information to go on. And one of the things in the government guidance is that they have to do a location. In all parts of the process, they have to do a location assessment. And that looks at the suitability of the location with regard to the facilities that are around it and whether the children are safeguarding needs. Now, the police have actually submitted questions that would have been answered had this been submitted as part of the supplementary documents. I mean, they've said that there is already concerns at the college, and you are putting these children, these vulnerable children that could be targeted, where the police already have concerns. The police have already said that in other establishments in the area that there is a tendency for children to abscond. Now, the location of this is not in our town centre hub.
Sorry, Councillor Thornton, is there a question?
There is a question, yes.
Thank you.
It's not in a town centre hub. That means that these children are more likely to go further. They'll get on a bus and they'll go there, because there isn't the McDonald's or the whatever where they would go and sit. Now, the police have said that this will cause them greater work, but this would have been contained in the location plan. Have you had any discussion with the applicant regarding the location plan and the suitability of the location overall, not the building, the location?
We've not had any discussions with the applicant insofar as that sort of location plan that you're describing. However, we consider, as officers, from a planning perspective, we consider that given its location, whilst it's not in a town centre hub as you describe, that actually it provides sort of all the facilities that a home may need. It's got adequate access to transport, local schools, shops. Yes, for instance, if they did want to go and sit at a McDonald's, it's slightly further afield. They'd have to get on a bus and go into Hadley. But it doesn't necessarily follow that they're necessarily going to, as the police said, that they might necessarily abscond. That's almost on a case-by-case basis with the child.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll come back to you.
On page 13 of the report, and I'll let you work your way through your agendas, there is a comment, and I quote, and I'll quote it as it's written: "The close proximity, A13, has a speed limit of 30 miles per hour in the area, meaning it should be no more dangerous than any other residential road." My question: does the officer share this view, bearing in mind that the government's own website states that the suitability assessment for such care home should consider the needs of the children who are expected to live in the home? For example, you should assess whether the location is close to environmental hazards such as reservoirs, busy roads or railway lines. Thank you.
I believe this is covered, it might be covered slightly later in the report, but broadly, I do agree with that statement that was in support. Some of the objection comments raised that it was inappropriate to have children living in a property on a road like the A13. However, there are many residential properties along the A13 that all have children living at them. And given that, it wasn't considered any more dangerous from our perspective than living on any other road in the borough, or whether it was just a normal dwelling house living there. So whilst there is obviously inherent danger with any road, it's no greater just because this is a children's care home versus if it's a normal residential dwelling.
Councillor Thornton.
On the issue of parking is an obvious concern. There's statements in the operation plan that was submitted, like there will always be one space for the Ofsted inspector, and the inspector can use public transport. There will always be one space available for the visiting social worker. There will always be one space available for visitor residents. Now, you've got 4 separate bedrooms, and if you go back to the letter that Mr. Zola sent in himself, he says 4 to 5. So I don't know if that's been clarified either. But with 4, that's different social workers, different visitors. The changeover of staff, you will have 4 staff in situ at the changeover half hour. You've got, if they're not in education locally placed, they will have home education. So there needs to be a facility and the amenities for them to have that education, and you will have those professionals coming to the building. You will have nursing and care staff coming to the building, and you will have an increase in the emergency services. And you can see that in applications that have gone in other areas, that the police, there are increases.
Councillor
So can
Thornton,
you say-
I do apologise for interrupting you, but is there a question? This is a question
there is
section.
a question.
It
There will
seems to be a
always
very
question.
long prologue before the question, yeah?
Yes.
Thank you.
So can you answer me, what account has been taken of all of this? Because you've just said that there's one visitor space. This is not, that there's no sufficiency for all of this that is likely to go on a day-to-day basis.
So just picking up the point about in the letter, it says 4 to 5 children. We have clarified that it's 4, and there is a condition attached to the recommendation limiting it to a maximum of 4 occupants, children at any one time. So that sort of clarifies that point. With the parking, it's important to note that the Essex parking standards are a maximum parking standards where it comes to these sorts of uses. Therefore, it's not a minimum like it is a normal residential dwelling where you have to attain that. It's a maximum because parking is acknowledged as a land-hungry use, and it's sought to come up with a reasonable amount. So in this instance, I believe it was assessed to require 6 parking spaces. We've looked at it, and although there's not a parking plan on the site, there are 3 usable spaces at the front of the site that are already existing and that can be used. Whilst it's acknowledged that there's going to be a changeover period between the staff where there's potentially 4 staff that could be parking at the site or having to change over at the site, there's the potential for some overspill of parking where there's potentially, if one of them doesn't or some of them don't use public transport. However, it's important to note that the surrounding roads either have double yellow lines or are permit holders only parking, so it wouldn't spill into those nearby residential streets such as Connybrook and nearby roads, or Kiln Road itself, which is double yellow lines. And in the management plan, we have discussed it with the applicant that there's the concern that during those times where you've got 2 members of staff on site, that only leaves the 1 visitor space. And it was discussed that during those times, it would be visitors to the children at the home, whether that be family, friends, parents, nurses, Ofsted, any sort of visitors like that would be pre-arranged so that they don't fall within that changeover period, and also so that they sort of like don't conflict with one another, so that there isn't a higher demand than that visitor space can provide.
So what assessment have you done for the logistics of how many we've got and what the estimate of all these visits are? Because they'll all need the visits, they'll all need that, so that will be a turnaround of cars coming. What assessments has the planning office done to come up with what the estimates will be?
We haven't come up with any estimates as to how many vehicle sort of movements there would be.
Councillor Howlett.
Thank you. Jackie Thornton's just asked most of my question, but between 7:30 and 8 in the morning and in the evening, you're going to have 4 staff at the home, potentially all with their own cars. And with children up to 18 years old, you potentially got some of them with cars as well. Has that been taken into account?
Of course, they could have their own vehicles. It would be down to the management of the property as to whether they would allow the vehicles there as well. However, under the planning process, we've considered that whilst the parking standards say a maximum of 6 spaces should be provided, we think that actually in practical terms 3 spaces is sufficient, and that from an officer's perspective we don't think that objecting to the proposal on the basis of a lack of parking would be sustainable.
If there are no other questions, the planning officer's recommendation is for approval. But before I go ahead, can I just ask people to try and keep your questions as questions? Yeah, some are rather long-winded. The planning officer's recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Please note that members should only speak once during the section of the meeting and try to limit themselves to 3 to 4 minutes. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Skipp.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The first point I want to make is just an observation on my part, but I feel it's appropriate to say this now. According to the report, planning permission was given to build 12 houses and garages in 1969, but obviously that was a long time ago, and this was not progressed. What stands out to me is that by approving this application before us today, which we have to consider obviously, are we not neglecting to fulfil the full potential of the site? But I know that's a side issue, but I just thought I'd be able to mention that. Right, now this has been touched on before. Essex Police, when consulted, said that if the children are likely to abscond, this could put additional pressures on the police service, as has been mentioned previously. And I do not believe that the report addresses this issue sufficiently. They went on to say that there have been cases of missing children from other care homes going on to become involved in crime, which is obviously something we ought to be concerned about. Now, the Children's Act 1989, as was pointed out in the report, requires local authorities to provide secure accommodation for children in their care within 20 miles of home. The report before us this evening states that this is proposed, that this house would accommodate children under the care of ECC and neighbouring or local authorities. Okay? And this would mean that the proposal would not necessarily comply with the 20-mile guidance within the Children's Act. Now, I note that it is the officer's view that the lack of amenity space for the proposed use of this premises is not sufficient, but the proximity of woodland is sufficient to correct this deficiency. The only problem I have with that is that the children will be in care of ages 13 to 18, and I do not feel that open woodland is appropriate as a suitable safe recreation space for vulnerable children that need supervision while they're out playing, etc. Finally, again, has been mentioned by previous people, including Mr. Silk, the available parking spaces do not comply with the adopted parking standards of this council, and I acknowledge that the premises is near to public transport, but it is not reasonable to assume that staff and visitors will use this option when attending the home. For these reasons, I'm unable to support this application on this occasion.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Thornton.
I'd like to agree with Councillor Skipp. Also, I don't feel that there's enough information for us to be able to make a decision, a sound decision on tonight. The police have questioned the suitability of the location. The parking is an issue and will be an issue, and therefore, as much as I agree we need this type of facility, I don't think this is the right location, and on the grounds of amenity to the neighbours, because we don't know the full details, and the parking issues, again because we don't know the full details, I can't accept it. Thank you very much.
Councillor Liz.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important that I start by saying that I'm not opposed to the principle of providing these children's care home in Castle Point. I recognise there is a legal obligation for us to do so, and these are some of the most vulnerable children in our society. But I have to say the application does worry me. It does. It's worried me from sort of day one, and I'm surprised in the report that words such as safeguarding, every child matters, children protection don't appear anywhere in there. Like Councillor Thornton has said, for me there is a lack of detail. It may well be a very, very sound application, but consultation with the external bodies that are going to place these children there, knowing that they've got no concerns with regards to the site and the applicant and everything else, that would give me great comfort to know that we would have that. Parking is an issue. Parking is an issue. I've worked in mental health care myself, and yeah, I know exactly what they're talking about with the handovers and shift patterns. So yeah, there will be 2 staff on site, and the other 2 will arrive. Hopefully there'll be a handover. They're going to need to park. Now, they're either going to park somewhere on that site, which I don't think they can, or they're going to go on those double yellow lines, I would have thought. So there are concerns. So thank you for the report. But for me, as I say, my opinion is that there are some flaws in it, and there's some information that we should have been provided with. Thank you.
Councillor Barton-Brown.
I would just like to second what my colleague, Councillor Rob Lillis said. For me, the fact that no real scoping has been done by any bodies that would be looking after the children in these facilities is a concern to me. I mean, the fact that ECC don't have to provide any commentary, the fact that the house isn't properly looked at or reviewed or scoped in any way concerns me. There are vulnerable children in our society that do need protecting. There's many people in our borough that have probably had to utilise this kind of facility for them or their children. We need to support the children in this society, but we have to safeguard them. And along with some of my colleagues here, I've seen some programmes on the TV where all these organisations are set up to look after children, and they don't. They are mismanaged. They can be money-making machines where inappropriate care isn't delivered. So I really feel that to make this kind of decision, we need more information and more robust information from the people in the know who manage these kind of facilities as to whether or not this is the right place for all concerned.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone else like to speak? I'm just going to let the officer come back on a couple of points.
So just to pick up on a couple of points that have come through, is that I agree that there's been no scoping by Essex County Council. However, that is not to say that the building will not be scoped. Essex County Council have their own procedures in place, and so do Ofsted to inspect, who are separate regulatory bodies to inspect premises. It's not to say that the building will not be scoped after planning permission. It's just not required as part of the planning process. And that's why it's not been a requirement, or officers haven't requested it be done. As far as safeguarding as well, that is also a responsibility of Essex County Council and Ofsted for children for Ofsted, children under the age of 16, and then for Essex County Council and anyone that they place there. It's not part of the planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Barton-Brown.
If I could just come back to Stephen on that point. So if we approved it, just say this evening, and it went and was scoped, could they then turn around and say this facility is actually not appropriate?
Potentially so.
Councillor Thornton.
I understand that the scoping and the location and the safeguarding, none of it is planning material considerations. I understand that, and that's for that reason. If we want to refuse it, we've got to find planning reasons to refuse it. So the amenity and the parking would be those reasons. The scoping does come afterwards. That's part of them getting their registration, and it's not a planning matter. But we don't have enough information here to know that that's going to go well. But we can't make a decision on that. So we need to find a material planning, and my opinion is that that should be the amenities and the parking.
Thank you, Councillor Thornton. Does anyone else wish to speak? Members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands? Those for the motion. Those against the motion. And I will abstain.
Oh, you're abstaining?
Yes. Okay. Yes, now we will need an alternative motion to be passed and seconded. Councillor Skipp.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd propose refusal on the lack of amenity space and not conforming to our adopted parking standards.
You second that? Yep. Thank you.
I would just say that advise members that on the amenity space argument, this is already a relatively large property and the garden is an existing situation. You could have a large family move in there, and the garden would would be the same for them, and we would not object to it on that basis, which is why officers haven't objected to it. It's an existing situation, and it's not something that I feel that officers could support as a reason for refusal. The same as I outlined earlier with the parking, I don't think it's something that would be sustainable on appeal. However, members are, of course, they're sort of go against officers' recommendation.
I'm just going to ask Cheryl to read out the wording of this.
So just to clarify, it's that the application be refused on the basis of lack of amenity and it doesn't meet the council's parking standards. Yeah. Okay.
Could we have a show of hands in favour of the amendment?
So just to be clear, it's in favour of refusal on those grounds.
Yes.
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, Chairman.
Those against?
One against. And abstentions.
And I will abstain. Yes, the application is refused. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Item 4, Benfleet Football Club, Manor Road. I will now hand over to the planning officer to present this item. Sorry, I should say that if members in the public gallery wish to leave, now would be an appropriate time to do so. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone left? No one from Benfleet Football Club. I'm not going to read it.
Thank you very much. Just to reiterate, item 4, Benfleet Football Club, Manor Road. I'll now hand over to the planning officer to present this item.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is at Benfleet Football Club up at Woodside Park, and it is an application to erect a 2.4 metre high security fence around with access gates and a turnstile entrance, a 1.1 metre high pitch side boundary fence, 4 grandstands, and each with 25 seats, and 6 floodlights to replace the existing 4 floodlights. So the site is located to the north of the you've got the cricket fields over here, the Bowls Club here, you've got Fane Road to the north here, and you've got the Woodside Cemetery here. And the football field in question is this football field here, enclosed by this it's meant to be red/blue line around the edge there. So you can see a bit clearer on the aerial shot here. The pitch layout's a little bit different on the shot, but there's proposed to be a single football pitch enclosed within this area. These alterations are required for Benfleet Football Club to meet the Football Association's ground grading system, so that their first team can play at the Step 6 level of the non-league system. So that's part of the requirements. Actually, whilst at the site, an officer witnessed motorbikes going across the site, and some of these photos were taken then, and also some were provided by the applicant of other times that motorcycles have gone across the field, and this causes a problem for the football club in that it damages their field. They also suffer from dog walkers not picking up the dog mess on the football field, which has to be cleared up properly before any games are played. So moving on to a bit more in detail what the application is. So round the outside of the proposed site is proposed to be a green sort of mesh fence similar to the one pictured here, and that's proposed to be 2.4 metres high to prevent access to the site and enable them to keep it in sort of better condition. Within the site, just around the edge of the pitch, is proposed to be a sort of 1.1 metre high pitch fence to provide a separation distance between spectators and players on the pitch. You've got a turnstile gate which is proposed, I believe, about here next to the clubhouse, and then these 4 grey rectangles here are proposed to be the stands, which each hold 25 spectators each, so 100 in total. And then you've also got, there's proposed to be 6 floodlights, 1 in each of the corners and 1 here to propose them to illuminate it. Whilst the application site is within the greenbelt, officers consider that the minimal harm to the greenbelt is outweighed by the benefits of the proposal to the local football club, health and well-being of local people, and the facilities that it will create. There's a number of conditions that are recommended to help mitigate any harm that may arise, mainly from the lighting, which involve that sort of require that the lighting can only be used between the hours of 8 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock at night. If they want to go outside of those times, they need the written consent and they submit another application. That's to help sort of nocturnal wildlife in the area. And then also a condition that's recommended by Environmental Health is that the lighting levels don't exceed those levels which are permitted in locations such as this in the Institute of Lighting Guide. So just to make sure that they don't put in some really bright lights that are going to blind everyone. However, subject to those conditions, the application before you is recommended for approval by officers, and I'll hand back to the chairman.
Thank you, Stephen. Before I move the recommendation, do members have any questions for the planning officer about this planning application? Councillor Skipp.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I have 2 questions. The first one is in relation to the actual location of this. Is this a football pitch that can be hired out by anybody who applies for it, or is it uniquely for the football ground for the applicant? Second question is, which you have partially covered in your report. I note that there is a proposal to install 6 lighting columns on this site. What research have you done to assess the impact on local residents and the environment? I think you have covered some of that in your answer already.
So I'm not aware of whether the pitch is available for hire or just for use by the applicant. It's not something that's part of the planning application. However, the land is leased from the council to the applicant for the purposes of using it as a football club. Where the lighting columns are concerned, they've submitted a lighting assessment which involves using sort of directional LED lighting to minimise what's called sky glow and glare. Environmental Health have been consulted and they've raised no objection in terms of the impact on local residents. In fact, I mean, I don't think I've got a particularly, I mean, there's the closest local resident, I believe there is a property here and just up here as well. And Environmental Health haven't raised any objections to those, and coupled with the condition limiting the times of use, it's considered that it will minimise the potential impact that there may be on any nearby residents or wildlife.
Councillor Howlett.
Thank you. The drawing you had up originally, Stephen, that's it. On there, it says that there's 4 proposed grandstands. 2 stands providing 50 seats per stand, and 2 stands providing 50 standing per stand, with a total of 100 seats plus 100 standing places. So that's 200, not 100.
My apologies, let me have a look. So the information I've got is that it's to create seated capacity for 125 per stand.
It's different to what it shows on that screen.
Yes, that's correct. I think the size of the stands, no matter sort of like the capacity of the standing or seating area, whilst there might be some discrepancy between our report and what's on the drawing. I don't think that it materially alters the fact that the shape and form of those.
But it would affect the parking.
So-
Spaces provided. Because
Yes.
there's an extra 100 people.
It could well do. However, when speaking to the applicant, it's not anticipated that whilst they're providing these facilities, that would increase spectatorship. It's in order to meet the grading system for them to meet it. And on the subject of parking, there's a good number of spaces. Again, it's similar to the last item. It's a maximum parking standard. Let me find the section in the report. So. It was assessed that if in the report, if there was 100 people, it would require an additional 10 spaces from what there is already. However, that's a maximum of 130 spaces. We counted that there's a significant number of spaces already in the car park for the football club and also in the car park for Woodside and the access road to it. And there's sort of been no objection. Officers haven't raised any objection on parking. However, I understand your comments about the additional people posed by the stands.
Councillor Thornton.
This is a Greenbelt site, but the increase in sporting is one of the permitted developments on Greenbelt to encourage that. However, we seem to have a bit of a contradiction in what we're saying, because after corresponding with the agent, it's been confirmed that the site is not expected to see an increase in visitors as a result of this development. So how can we justify that we are enhancing the offering to just justify the inappropriate development in the Greenbelt?
So the Paragraph 149 of the MPPF allows for the provision of appropriate facilities for outdoor sport and outdoor recreation in the Greenbelt, as long as it doesn't sort of too greatly harm the Greenbelt purpose of the Greenbelt. Whilst they're not anticipating additional visitors, it provides enhanced facilities for the club, enhanced opportunities in terms of sort of the league that they're able to play in. So it doesn't provide enhanced facilities in terms of attracting more people, but it enhances the existing facilities.
It doesn't widen the scope, it gives a better scope to those that are using it.
Yes.
Councillor Barton-Brown.
Okay. Obviously, this site at the back of Woodside is used by multiple different areas of our community. We've got the bowling club, people picnic over there, people walk their dogs. But the biggest part of our community over there that concerns me is the horse community. We've got bridleways over there. The main thing for me is that it's not going to restrict any of the bridleways or the access. I don't believe, looking at the plans, it will do. But I just want to confirm that our horse riders will still have the access to the backfields. They run their events and things over there. It does look like it's predominantly that first picture where the clubhouse currently is, but I just really want to understand where the bridleways and that are in relation to this, please.
Yes, so bearing in mind where the pitch and the fences are proposed in relation to the clubhouse, if I now flip, here we go. So here's the clubhouse with the outline of the pitch. So at the moment, you've got a public footpath which runs up through here at the moment, which would be unaffected by this, and the bridleway goes all the way along the bottom of the field here, which wouldn't be impinged upon whilst it comes close in that corner. I don't believe, based on the map of the bridleways, that it would have any impact on that, because it goes all the way along here and then goes up here and also continues round this field and exits out onto Fane Road up here. So I don't believe that it would impact on the bridleways or public footpaths in the area.
Councillor Thornton.
Because it's situated in the centre of an open, or more or less in the centre of an open space, is it likely to cause any issues with the fact that you've now got alleyways and fences, and is that going to attract, has it been considered that that could attract sort of vandals or antisocial behaviour?
Yes, there is the potential that it sort of creates some narrowing of the field, particularly in sort of the location down here and up here. Obviously, with any development, there's the chance to attract unwanted attention. I think in this instance, given that it's not proposing, they're not sort of solid walls, it's proposing sort of mesh fencing, it would still provide a degree of openness and visibility, which would hopefully lend itself towards sort of creating a safer environment where if anyone were to gather there, you'd be able to see them plenty far in advance, and there wouldn't be any sort of secluded hiding spaces that people might be able to hide in, especially given that the stands are sort of included close to the clubhouse, which would have solid siding. So I don't think it would sort of lend itself to that sort of behaviour.
Councillor Raycott.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of questions. Can we ask or insist that the fencing in the turnstile, to me it appears it's going to be a green, that it remains that colour, so at a later date if the paint has to be redone, it's repainted in that shade rather than some bright colours. And the other thing is, do we know how often the pitch is going to be used? I understand that sometimes these floodlight pitches, apart from using for the games, which is with the possibly their first team, but the other teams use it in the evening for training areas, and turning the lights off often becomes a problem. Or, of course, on match days, they have a time to have them off by, but they don't appear to keep to that on training if the pitch is used by other age groups within the club. They keep them on, and if need be, someone will walk off and they'll be left on all evening. Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So condition 3 of the on the recommendation says that the external surfaces, which will include the fence, should be hereby approved, or if it is approved, should be treated in accordance with the details submitted. So because it's been submitted that they're green, if they were to at a later date change it to a colour that wasn't green, they could be in breach of that condition. And then so far as the use of the pitch, it's the applied for use is so that they could potentially use it up to the floodlights up to 10 o'clock each night, any day of the week. There's been no objections from environmental health. However, condition 4 puts a limit on when the floodlights can be on. If they do exceed that time frame, so they do leave them on after 10 o'clock regularly and it's reported to us, they would be in breach of the condition, and we could take enforcement action to ensure that they are turned off at 10 o'clock when they should be.
Councillor Barbara.
Thank you. Obviously, we've got the main floodlights on the pitch. Is there any other lighting for the car park pathway in the application as well that's going to sort of bring some additional benefit to the area? Because it's very dark up there, and we have reports from the bowling club, etc., about poor lighting at night time, etc. So I'm just wondering if there's any other lighting going in apart from the main floodlights of the pitch that would be extra benefits to the area and could help the anti-social behaviour side of things as well.
There's no other lighting forms part of this application, so there's no.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of real quick points. Does this mean that the lease will need to be amended at all? My understanding is this is council ground and we lease it to Benfleet Football Club for a period of time. Would that need to be, perhaps it's one for the legal team, would it need to be revisited to permit such development? And the second one, if I may just quick jump in, there was a question from my colleague with regards to training and so forth. I'm going to show my age now, but when I used to run a team, south of the clubhouse, as you look at it on that map, there used to be a floodlit area. I don't know whether they've removed that, but there used to be 4 floodlights in that square area there, where it used to be a bit of a mud bath, to be honest with you. But we used to train there, and so it wouldn't actually. I think you'd find that the first team pitch would be sacred. They wouldn't wish to have that all muddied up. Okay, thank you.
The question about the lease isn't a material planning consideration. It would be something that the legal team would, if it was required. But yeah, it's not something that would be considered by this committee.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Rycott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not all that familiar with this particular area, but are there any kind of residential properties quite close to the pitch? Thank you, Chairman.
So this is the most zoomed out map I've got. You've got a nearest residential property is here, the other side of the clubhouse from the proposed sort of floodlit area, and then there is a house sort of just up above where I'm indicating here along Fane Road. To the south of Woodside Cemetery here, you've got the top of Manor Road and a larger sort of more populated residential area, but the nearest residential properties would be these two here. Other than that, the other houses are quite remote from the site.
Are there any other questions before we move to the debate section? Okay. The Planning Officer's recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Skip.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. My understanding of this is an application for a football club, and it's not a football ground, which is what they're proposing to turn this into. And therefore, this must be public open space in the true sense of the word. Now, by paragraph 149 of the framework states that the construction of buildings on sites like this are not appropriate, and I know there are exceptions where it could, for sporting facilities, etc. But this is public open space, and by fencing in this site, it is taking a big chunk of what I consider to be public open space away from use. Now, I understand that the closing this area for the club would hold significant improvements for them for the reasons that you said about their compliance with the league rules. But I also note that the antisocial behaviour shown in the photos that we have just seen, and I think this is a valid reason for granting permission, but the issue is that this behaviour is unfortunately prevalent in many of our open spaces in the borough. So are we going to protect all these areas in similar circumstances? And I fear that by approving this tonight, we will be setting a precedent for all such locations within the borough that have a similar situation. So in conclusion, I cannot ignore the fact that an area of public open space will be lost, and because of that and the other reasons I have highlighted, I regretfully cannot support this application tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Skip. Councillor Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From what I've seen, I think this is an excellent application. I think it's going to benefit the local football club and others that come there to play football. I don't see that it's going to cause any unnecessary problems for the local residents. The horse trial that Councillor over there has spoken about, it's not going to affect that either. Yes, okay, it's on Greenbelt. We're not damaging the Greenbelt. I mean, it's already a football pitch anyway. If anybody's damaging it, it's the vandalism that's being done with motorbikes ridden around it. So at the moment, by doing what we're going to do, and if it goes through, hopefully we'll put and alleviate the problems of vandalism over there. So I think it's an excellent application. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with our Vice Chair. I think this is a good news story, and God knows we need a few of those nowadays. So I wish Benfleet Football Club all the success with their endeavours here and for the season ahead. Thank you.
Councillor Barton Brown.
We also have to remember that we've got Woodside Park to the left of this. There is a lot of green space over there. Yes, this pitch is being fenced off, but we're not talking about 2.5 metre concrete walls. They're green, they're open. I've got fencing similar to that opposite my house. You wouldn't even really know that it's there. You've got huge expanse of space over Woodside Park, other large green fields to the right of this. I think there's still plenty of amenity space. The main thing for me with this application is that there's still public space available for all to enjoy. The dog walkers, the horse riders, the football club. There's a place for everybody in the community to have what they need. The residents aren't near the site. There's big trees before you get into Manor and where the car park is, and it slopes down slightly. So I've been up there and looked around. Obviously, this is my ward, so I know this area well. I don't believe the floodlights or the amenity would be at the detriment to the other residents. You know, we're telling kids to get out there, be fit, be part of sport, socialise. This is a big part of that for multiple teams up there. And I think the fact they've got the funding and this money, I think this would be a good benefit to the area. And yes, it's on Greenbelt, which I'm not a fan of building on, but this is the kind of structure that if in time it wasn't viable anymore, you could destruct it and get the field back. It's not like building big concrete houses. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak? Okay. The motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Chairman.
Those against the motion?
1, Chairman.
And no abstentions. That concludes the application is approved. And can I just say, unusual though it is for the chairman to speak, I think that's a very good news story to echo with my fellow councillor. That concludes the business for this meeting. Thank you very much for attending and good evening.